Everyone, imagine that you die right now. I'll be sad, your family and friends will be sad, of course, but there is someone instead who will be happy. And that someone is GDP. Wait, I'll stop you there, because I know what you're thinking, but no, it's not the Great Depression of PhD students. No, rather GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. Or in other words, it is the amount of goods and services, the product, that have been produced within national borders, domestic, nothing deducted, gross. GDP has long been used as a measure of well-being, but what is good for the economy need not necessarily be good for society as well. You might not be happy to die, of course, but in theory, that makes GDP increase, because you will need to pay for, well, not you, because you'll be dead, but your parents will need to pay for the coffee and the flowers and so on. Similarly, on Amazon, Hamlet and a ream of paper have exactly the same price. Now, if no one were printing Shakespeare's plays anymore, but only reams of paper, there would be a huge loss for society, even though GDP would remain the same. For this and other reasons, hundreds of alternative or complementary measures to GDP have been developed, focusing especially on well-being. Yet the vast majority of them has now died out, and their impact on policymaking has been very limited. Why? Well, what you just heard is my research question. Or to be more precise, what factors inhibit the uptake and the application of well-being indicators? But being more specific, you might be thinking, what countries are you going to look at and what are you actually going to do? First question. I will focus on Scotland and Italy, two among the most active countries internationally in the development of well-being indicators, the application of which, however, has often proved hard. Second question, how? I will interview statisticians who will tell me why it's hard for them to promote the well-being indicators that they develop. Journalists will tell me instead why it's hard for them to talk about well-being, and policymakers why it's hard to dislodge GDP from their toolkit. Will all this have any impact at all? Yes, it will, because we need to change the way we look at things and the things we look at, if we want to promote our quality of life without compromising that of future generations, that is you and your future children. Now, before I conclude, let me ask a question. How many of you here have read or watched Hamlet? Raise your hands. Great. You will all remember Danny's famous monologue, isn't it? How did it go again? Oh, yeah. To GDP or not to GDP? That is the question. Thank you.